Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is a Ukraine war news update where we're going to be talking about the peace negotiations that have been taking place in Florida, in Miami yesterday between the Americans and Ukrainians. See where this leaves the war, the negotiation process, whether it's actually changed anything or not. And then we're going to be looking at the context of the wider war and how that either is reflected by the peace negotiations or is changed at all by the peace negotiations. Right, before we get into the finer details, please remember to like, subscribe and share. That's always really awesome if you do so. I am super appreciative of those who have subscribed. Thank you. Let's get into it. Okay, so I did a video yesterday where I talked about the NBC article that saw a number of Ukrainian frontline fighters share their views with NBC, saying that basically, if it's a capitulation where we have to give up the Donbas that we're fighting for right now on the front line, then we're going to be, unless we are given some really good reasons for giving up the Donbas, ain't going to happen. So there's an interesting dynamic that has oftentimes been ignored, and that's how do the actual Ukrainian fighters feel about a peace negotiation that will see the surrender of Ukrainian territory that the Russians haven't already taken. So the Americans need to be careful, or, well, do they? I mean, do they really care? You might have this situation where they try and railroad through an agreement where the Ukrainians have all sorts of concessions, but of course Zelensky and his team have to pass this through the Verkhovna Rada and get any agreement, sanctioned by the Ukrainian political scene, but also the people in Ukraine themselves. If they are not going to be happy with the outcome of this war, they're tired, right, and exhausted, and want to see their families as their frontline fighters, but at the same time, they're not sacrificing their lives and their limbs for a capitulation, for a surrender. So that needs to be taken into account when considering the peace negotiations. Right. Apparently, according to Sergei Kyiv, who was, I think he was a chap that was the UN, I think he's the guy on the right there, the UN ambassador, or the Ukrainian ambassador to the UN. He was very good in that position, by the way. He said he's part of the delegation. It's been a good start of the ongoing meeting, very engaging and so far constructive. Warm atmosphere, conducive to potential progressive outcome. Great leadership of Marco Rubio. As in Geneva, I appreciate the attitude of Jared Kushner and how he lays out a vision. Now, I find this fascinating. There are three men sitting opposite this Ukrainian delegation, right? The three, and it looks like, is that Andriy Sabihar down there? You've got Rustem Umerov, you've got Kyiv there. Can't quite work out who the other two are. And I think you've got Budanov involved as well. I don't know who that is at the very end there. But you have on the other side of the table, I don't know. On the other side of the table, you have Marco Rubio in the middle, Jared Kushner on the left, and Steve Witkoff on the right. And your man here says these two on the left here doing a great job. Yeah, great to have them on board. Doesn't mention Steve Witkoff. And of course, Steve Witkoff is the highly controversial member of the delegation because he appears to be entirely pro-Russian and perfectly willing to do Kirill Dmitriev's bidding, perfectly willing to do Putin's bidding in these negotiations. And so he doesn't get a mention. I find that very revealing indeed. Anyway, as the discussions were going on and on, we have completed, said Rustem Umerov, a difficult but productive session of negotiations in Florida. We have made tangible progress on the path to establishing a just peace. The meeting was meaningful and successful. There is still a lot of work ahead. So that's fairly positive as an outlook from the Ukrainians, but it's still a lot of work to do. Kyiv Independent states, as an update, officials tout a productive talks as Ukraine and the US conclude their peace deal talks in Florida. In a press briefing following the meeting, Rubio called the meetings very productive. We're going to listen to this in a second, adding that the talks focused on both the terms to ending the war as well as Ukraine's long-term prosperity. Quote, I thought we started laying the groundwork in Geneva. I think we continue to work in our communications throughout the week. I think we've built on that today, but there's more work to be done, Rubio told reporters. This is delicate, it's complicated. There are a lot of moving parts, and obviously there's another party involved here, Rubio added, referring, of course, to Russia. So, of course, all of this needs to be passed through Russia. Now, what I'm going to do is get you to listen to this, but I want you to watch this as well, because whoever was in charge of the camera here and was doing the zooming did a fabulous job. Not only listen to the words, then look at Steve Witkoff's face.
The end goal is obviously not just the end of the war. Obviously, that's essential and fundamental. We want to see the end of the killing and the death and the suffering, and I'm sure the Ukrainian side, I know they do as well. They want peace, but
he's an unshaven man, bleary-eyed, and he looks. I'm just trying to work out what that look is in his face. I don't know, empty and vacuous, or is it guilty, or is it disagreement with Marco Rubio? I don't know. If you're trying to read people's faces, is obviously a very difficult pastime, but there's something about this zoom.
That's essential and fundamental. We want to see the end of the killing and the death and the suffering, and I'm sure the Ukrainian side, I know they do as well. They want peace, but it's also about securing an end to the war that leaves Ukraine sovereign and independent and with an opportunity at real prosperity. So this is not just about ending the war. And
I want to concentrate on that part, because this is the Trumpian Witkoff approach, isn't it? Which is, it's about business, it's not about peace. And I'm in two minds about what Marco Rubio says here, because on the one hand, of course you want Ukrainians to be prosperous after the end of the war. You don't want to leave them destitute. You don't want the country to be ruined. But if that's a single, if that is front and center of everything you do, then you're possibly going to be leaving out ideas of morality and justice there. And whenever you hear, and we heard that from Rustam Umarov talking about a just peace just now, whenever you hear Ukrainians talk, or even Europeans talk about the peace deals and negotiations, they talk in terms of a just peace, and the Americans never do. For the Americans, or very rarely, it's about business, it's about prosperity and so on and so forth.
Ukraine sovereign and independent and with an opportunity at real prosperity. So this is not just about ending a war. This is about ending a war in a way that creates a mechanism and a way forward that will allow them to be independent and sovereign, never have another war again, and create tremendous prosperity for its people. Not just rebuild the country, but to enter an era of extraordinary economic progress.
Extraordinary economic progress. Hasn't mentioned once justice. Hasn't mentioned once anything to do with ordinary morality, as we would understand it. And I find that fascinating.
Ukraine has tremendous economic potential. Ukraine has tremendous opportunity for true prosperity. Obviously, you can't do that in the middle of a war like this, but ending the war alone won't achieve that. So
that focus there, I think, yeah, by all means, talk about that, mention that, but to have that's your central pillar of peace, which I think Marco Rubio is doing there, because I think he's really reiterating the Trumpian Witkoff position. I find that distasteful. Anyway, Ukraine and US call for a lot of peace talks difficult but productive, as the Kyiv Independent had said. Right, US envoy Steve Witkoff heads to Moscow today. So after having been involved in those meetings where Kyslytsya doesn't mention him, he says, I like the cut of the jib of the other two. Pause for tumbleweed. Witkoff then goes, because obviously, that Wall Street Journal piece the other day did Witkoff no favors at all. Steve Witkoff heads to Moscow to discuss a potential peace deal with Putin after talks in Florida. But the problem is, Witkoff is your pro-Russian guy who is not aligned to Ukraine at all, and is probably going to take that negotiation in Florida that has been worked hard at by, no doubt, Marco Rubio, and he's going to throw it under the bus. I would have thought he's not going to, I don't think, do the hardest job of selling that to the Kremlin and to Putin. And of course, Putin needs to be forced to the negotiating table, and none of this is forcing Putin to the negotiating table, other than the sanctions on Lukoil and Rosneft. But again, as soon as Trump put that sanctions on, he let Hungary and Slovakia off, whilst at the same time saying Europe needs to stop buying hydrocarbons off Russia, like, go figure. All that I think Trump really sees happening in any negotiation is that Ukraine capitulates, because they're never going to win, because Russia's always bigger and has more people and more land, and so therefore can't lose against Ukraine. And so it's the smaller player that always has to give up to the bigger player. That's just how he sees relationships in general. Washington reportedly proposed Ukrainian withdrawal from Donbas, and Ukraine rejected it. As you can imagine, as of now, no final agreement exists. Discussions covered various subjects. So it might well not even be a finished document. It's a work in progress. So after progress in talks to end the Ukraine war, US diplomacy faces a Kremlin test, says that, I don't know, it looks like it could be AP, Associated Press piece. US demands the complete withdrawal of the armed forces of Ukraine from Donbas. Ukraine replied that this is impossible due to the constitution, the position of the society, and the realities of the front. Obviously, Ukraine. Okay, so that kind of takes into account what I was just talking about right at the beginning of this, which is what do people feel on the front line? What do people feel in government? What does the general public feel? And then, what does the constitution say? So you can't just give away areas of land that Russia has not been able to conquer. Why would you do that? And the fact that the US is still banging on about this, it's still trying to get Ukraine to sign up to these maximalist Russian objectives, means that Trump and his team haven't learned anything in 10 months. In 10 months, we're back to where we were in January. Like, Trump said he could solve this in one day, and he was serious about that. That was not hyperbole. He genuinely thought he could seal the deal. He keeps referencing how it's much more difficult than he thought. Yeah, of course it's difficult, especially when both sides have these red lines. One's an invading aggressor who says, we want it all. And the other is a sovereign country that wants our independence, says, no, we're not going to sign up to giving away our land to Russia. And then the US comes in and says, well, we're slightly more aligned with Russia, so we think you have to give up some of your land. And Ukraine is like, no, we will fight. Thank you very much. Of course we're going to say no. And that's what we told you back in January. You knew that. What are you doing 10 months later, still trying to get us to sign up to crossing the red lines that we've very clearly stipulated we cannot do for constitutional reasons? Like, how many of these negotiations do we have to go through where the same situation ends up being the outcome again and again? Like, when will the Trump administration understand this conflict? It's just beggars belief. Absolutely incredible. Now, the Russian newspapers say today, talking about the chances of a peace deal, quote, don't count on Russia making noticeable concessions. But also, if proposals are acceptable to Russia, one could talk of a summit in Budapest. Meanwhile, Russia's, quote, economic malaise betrayed by the rise in wage arrears. So I think that tells you, those three short sentences tell you all you need to know, which is, we ain't going to do peace, but if we do, we're going to delay it to some kind of talk in Budapest between Putin and Trump, where Putin will try and manipulate Trump again. But by the way, also, our economy is screwed. If you want Putin to come to the table, you sanction the crap out of Russia. And by the way, you still haven't put tariffs on Russia. You've got tariffs on everyone else in the world, including Ukraine, but you haven't got tariffs on Russia. What's going on there? You sanction the crap out of Russia, and you stick to heavy secondary sanctions, including on bloody Hungary and Slovakia. So you're not serious, Donald Trump, are you? You're really not serious about putting any pressure on Russia. And so we're just back to the beginning. But yeah, it tells us, these three sentences tells us they don't want peace, but if they're pushed to it, they'll delay and have more meetings in Budapest. But by the way, the economy is screwed. Now, Zelensky has gone to France today, to hang around people that actually appreciate him. Macron welcomed Zelensky at the Élysée Palace in Paris. The leaders will discuss the current situation and conditions for lasting peace, followed by a joint press conference. Here is an excerpt, I believe, from L'Opinion, saying Emmanuel Macron is trying to avoid a disguised capitulation of Ukraine in the face of the Trump-Putin bargain, which offers a peace plan favorable to Russia. The piece says, quote, the French head of state supports American efforts, but refuses to endorse a peace plan that would effectively be a capitulation. His aim is to maintain his relationship with the American president while ensuring that European security is not compromised. The coalition of the willing on security guarantees, as mentioned by the Élysée Palace, thus appears to be an attempt to provide Ukraine with a safety net, whether or not the United States is involved. So, yeah, Ukraine is seeking the solace of Europe. André Sibihar, the foreign minister, said, I was glad to meet with my colleague Jean-Noël Barrot, the French foreign minister. We coordinated steps in European affairs, safe mechanism to develop joint projects with Ukraine, further contributions to NATO's Pearl. So the safe is the European kind of rearmament process where Ukraine will benefit. And NATO's Pearl is the getting stuff from the US with NATO countries getting preferential, or at least it expedites supposedly the equipment that is bought through that initiative. And the decision, he continued, to enable the full use of frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine. So France is being a pretty important sort of comfort blanket, I suppose, to Zelensky and the Ukrainians in light of what the Americans appear to be trying to pressure. Kaya Kallas has come out and said next week could be decisive for Ukraine. The EU Foreign Affairs Chief, Kaya Kallas, has said, pointing to a series of key upcoming talks focused on long-term peace. She added that the EU is still awaiting the outcomes of negotiations between the Ukrainian and the US delegations. And also that, quote, we heard yesterday that the negotiations in America were difficult but productive. It is clear that Russia does not want peace, and therefore we need to make Ukraine as strong as possible. But as someone says, stop talking and do it. Difficult with a 28, almost 30-member nation organization where a few of those members don't really want to do it at all, trying to get everyone to agree and unite behind supporting Ukraine, although we're almost 4 years into the war. We've got von der Leyen here saying, Politico, saying that Europe demands that Trump not absolve Russia of responsibility for war crimes in Ukraine, and negotiators must ensure this. Quote, if we do this, allowing impunity for these crimes, we will sow the seeds of aggression and subsequent invasion. This will be a historic mistake. And I totally agree with that. And I do believe there was talk that yesterday the Ukrainians had successfully got the Americans to take back the wiping the war crime slate clean, which I think would be completely egregious if that was made to be the case. Now, Zelensky spoke with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte on Sunday, yesterday that is, and announced further talks in the coming days, saying, quote, these are important days and much can change as Ukrainian and American delegations negotiate in Miami. And of course, NATO then has also come out and said through Dragoni, is it, the Italian guy, one of the top guys in NATO, said that we are going to react more aggressively, basically, to Russian provocations, which is long overdue. Europe and NATO need to steel themselves against Russia much more robustly, and they need to, I think, start taking the fight to Russia and lay down some red lines for Russia, because at the moment it looks like, as I said to you some days back, that Zelensky and Ukraine are acting as the Thanksgiving turkey being carved up between Trump and Putin, and that absolutely needs to change. So that's basically where we are at. I mean, the key takeaway here is that unfortunately we're kind of back to where we were at the beginning, where you've got an American administration that at the very top, right through their negotiating team, not including Marco Rubio, actually, I don't think, but you have this sense that they haven't learned anything, and they're still trying to pressure Ukraine to do things that they are constitutionally unable to do, that they will not be able to pass through their parliament, and they will not be able to pass through the public. And so trying to make Ukraine sign up to this is ridiculous. All the pressure is on Ukraine, none of the pressure is on Russia. And how many times have we said that? So many bloody times. What's happened as a result? Nothing. It's, you know, we talk about intransigence. It's possibly the Trump administration that are being, you know, that is being the most intransigent out of all of the entities. Obviously, Russia is not conceding at all. All the concessions are demanded by the Americans, you know, by the Russians via the US. All the concessions are being exacted from Ukraine, and there needs to be a two-way street there. Absolutely, at the very minimum. Right, that's enough for me. Let me know what you think about what is going on. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Oh, and please remember to put into the address bar atpgeo.com/donate, and you'll get to our Jiggers Poor fundraising campaign, and you can help out there. Okay, take care. Speak soon.